highly perplexed, coming to you trying to share my thoughts on things that I've carried on reading and digging into, that all of you have probably read at some point, but I'm just sharing some of these points. I'm just reading from the Reasoning the Scriptures book, page 280, on the definition of organisation, and I quote: "An association or society of persons whose efforts are coordinated for a particular work or purpose. Members," and I'll say that again, members of an organisation are united by administrative arrangements and by standards or requirements. Persons who are dedicated and baptised witnesses of Jehovah come into Jehovah's organisation as a result of personal choice, not by birth or by any other compulsion. They have been drawn to his earthly organisation because its teachings and practices, and because they want to share in the work that it is doing. Fair enough. So they become members, do they not? It says they're members in there, in that book. This one, before you can get baptised, you have to be able to read this and answer all of the questions. I think it's about 140 now, isn't it? That's something like that. But I quote in part, page 26. It's talking about the structure of branch organisations, but in part it just says that these corporations are exclusively devoted to advancing the interests of true worship in the earth. All these legal instrumentalities cooperate with one another. Such legal corporations are used to facilitate the preaching of the good news worldwide and to care for the spiritual needs of the entire congregation of God in all parts of the earth. They are there to facilitate the preaching of the good news. Well, going back to the reasoning from the scriptures, the membership itself is the rank and file that does that, from your special pioneers and missionaries all the way through to your regular pioneers, to your auxiliary pioneers, to your publishers. Okay, so but they're all members. Okay, so what am I getting at? The Watchtower magazine, December the 1st, 1965, page 710, is interesting, talking of angels directing the work. We also have the Theocratic Ministry School Education, page 272, which says this: a vital proclamation under angelic direction would be made to every nation. It is God's will that this message be delivered. We have the privilege of sharing in that work. And the Watchtower is full of quotes through the years of angelic direction. You've read it yourselves, all these experiences of being taken to a door, and there's the person behind the door at the proper time, just before they're about to lynch themselves. They get the knock on the door, and there's the witness. Okay, so I've laid the foundation there, and what I'm trying to do is just give you an idea. I've got so much here that I could read. It just goes on all night. But I'm trying to just explain that Jehovah's Witnesses, when baptized, are dedicated to the preaching word, and they become members of the organisation. It says that in their literature all over the place. What I have here in front of me, and this is to do with Victoria, the state of Victoria in Australia, and it's a transcript of an audio recording of the public reading of a letter issued by the Committee of Management for the Religion of Jehovah's Witnesses over the need to comply with child protection laws, which became compulsory for religious organisations from July 2008 onwards in the state of Victoria, Australia. Okay, now to note this is the Christian congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses were forced to comply with mandatory child protection laws after they and the Watchtower Society were criminally charged on the 26th of July 2011 in the state of Victoria in relation to over 3 years of willful, we'll call it that, non-compliance within the law. Willful non-compliance of the law. Scary stuff. Well, here it is in part. I'm going to quote part of it. There's no point in reading the whole thing. But this is where it gets very interesting. You can imagine the brother stood up there and he starts talking and he announces this, and this has come from HQ. And in part it says that such Bible study activity is part of a publisher's personal ministry, and the publisher is not a representative or a volunteer of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Australia. So, brothers, I quote a bit more. The purpose of this letter is to serve as a reminder to all in the congregation of two facts. First of all, when we share in our field service, we are not serving in the capacity of a volunteer or a representative of Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. They are not serving in the capacity of a volunteer or representative of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. Would you say, if that's the case, from this management committee, they've been disassociated? They are no longer volunteers or representatives of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, even though we've read that they are. Even though to be baptised you have to say you are. But the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society is now saying, we don't want you as a volunteer and we don't want you as a member or a representative. That's profound. I've got something to read here. It's an interesting question. Who is liable for the religious activities of ministers of the religion of Jehovah's Witnesses when they engage in the preaching or evangelizing work? If the Committee of Management for the Religion of Jehovah's Witnesses within Australia is denying liability, or that they engage publishers to preach God's kingdom, then who is liable for engaging them? According to the teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses, Jesus Christ is the head of the church and the one who, along with God, engaged the individual members of the religion of Jehovah's Witnesses to preach about God's kingdom by command in the Bible, as interpreted by the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. In the state of Victoria, Australia, there are well over 10,000 active adult publishers and ministers of religion engaged in going out into the community preaching to not only men and women but also to children. Between July 2008, when the working with children laws became compulsory for religious organisations in the state of Victoria, Australia, up to July 2011, when the entire religious and corporate hierarchy of Jehovah's Witnesses were criminally charged with offences under the Working with Children Act 2005, and this is where I'll stop the quote in a minute. Have a guess how many individual Jehovah's Witnesses took a personal initiative to comply with the law out of 10,000 in that time period. Have a guess how many? 70. And don't forget that this is law. Complying with the law. Okay, come on to that bit in a minute. I've got something to say on that. By not accepting responsibility in relation to non-compliance with mandatory child protection laws, the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, the Faithful Slave, the Watchtower Society and the Christian Congregation of Jehovah's have appeared to put the blame onto Jesus Christ and Jehovah God. This is emphasised by what is written by the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses in the, back to this book, the Organised to Accomplish, to Do Jehovah's Will, page 9. And at page 9 it says this: Jehovah does not let his organisation go in any direction that it might be inclined to go, Ezekiel chapter 1 verse 20 says. Wherever the Spirit inclined to go, they would go. Thus, it is Jehovah who causes his organisation to move to wherever his Spirit impels it to move. Therefore, according to the teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses, the Holy Spirit, under the personal instruction and direction of Jehovah God, must have failed to comply with mandatory child protection laws. This would also apply to Jesus Christ, who went along with such criminal lawlessness for over 3 years from July 2008 onwards. Well, that's absolutely right. Those are the facts. By the same measure, the religion of Jehovah's Witnesses, the Watchtower Society, the governing body, are also literally claiming that any elder who has been appointed or attained as an elder since July the 1st, 2008 in the state of Victoria, and who did not already possess a current assessment notice, which is the Working with Children Act check, was not their responsibility, but the responsibility of the Holy Spirit who appointed that elder. It has to be that way. It was Jehovah God who appointed them, because they, as an organisation, have decided now to relinquish that responsibility. It's nothing to do with us, but it has to be Jehovah God and Jesus Christ. The same also applies to ministerial servants, organised to do Jehovah's will, page 58. July 15, 1990, when members of the religion of Jehovah's Witnesses preach in the community, this is Watchtower, they claim they are ultimately representative of God's kingdom and that they are sent from God. The Watchtower magazine confirms this by claiming that Jehovah's Witnesses are sent from God and they are doing their witnessing work under God's view. So who is ultimately responsible for the failure of the religion of Jehovah's Witnesses to comply with mandatory child protection for over 3 years? God or man? And this is what's perplexing me, because I know what it is, but I wonder how many of those 10,000 brothers and sisters have thought this through. They're no longer, they've relinquished all of their responsibility as volunteers and as representatives. You're neither now. We've disassociated you from that. So who is responsible for them? Now, this would all depend on whether individual members of the religion of Jehovah's Witnesses are indeed sent by God, and whether elders, ministers, servants are indeed appointed by God through Jesus Christ by means of his Holy Spirit. On the other hand, maybe Jehovah's Witnesses are nothing more than a convenient theological arrangement, which is what they said about the faithful and discreet slave. If you look at the Antichrist video I did, that's exactly what they said. What am I trying to get at here? Well, I mean, this is news to me. I've just read this, but it's quite profound, because there are many questions that need to be asked. For instance, this is the Australian Charities Commission would want to know about this, because what they're saying now is that we don't have any volunteers, we don't have any representatives. But in order to gain tax exemption as a charity, non-profit, they are taking money here, a lot of money. Where's it all going then, if they don't use these people to represent them? I'm sure there is some work to be done there. I mean, from what I can gather and what I've worked out from reading some of this stuff, is that the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Australia has claimed almost $3.5 million over the last 2 years against their income tax exemption status in relation to evangelising. Yet the evangelising work is only carried out by unpaid volunteer members of the religion of Jehovah's Witnesses, who now have just been disassociated, all 10,000 of them. It is worth noting that almost $10 million in donations and overseas aid over the past 2 years is primarily money transfers to non-profit corporations under the umbrella control of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Pennsylvania. The very corporation that now says it has no volunteers, it has no representatives in Victoria, Australia. That's profound. What I'm really looking forward to, and I'm interested to know, is where does the government go with this? There is a parliamentary commission taking place, I believe, very shortly, with Stephen Unthank, who's going to be talking through parliamentary privilege very shortly about all of the horrendous non-compliance by this organisation to protect children. Why do people have to fight to protect children? As a result of this is why we have such a mess to watch and read as this organisation disintegrates into a complete and utter farce. 10,000 publishers are no longer volunteers and they are no longer representatives. The biggest mass disassociation of Jehovah's Witnesses I think we'll ever see. And yet they're still Jehovah's Witnesses. The organisation just doesn't want to claim any responsibility for them. And the reason being, litigation. They don't want to be sued. They don't know what's coming as a result of all these assessment checks that are now being done. Do you, dear brothers? You know full well that there will be more that are going to go through checks because they want to go out on the ministry. And if they don't have those checks, they can't go out on the ministry with these children. And if they don't go out on the ministry, you're going to be asking questions, why aren't you out on the ministry? So the whole thing is an absolute mess. A Pandora's box, because you, dear brothers, decided to fight the compliance issues about these laws. The laws which you should have been complying with under Romans chapter 13. Unbelievable. I'm fascinated by it. Romans 13. What have we got here? Why are we actually involved? Why are you fighting this? This is an absolute no-brainer. The Romans 13, as published by the Watchtower Society and personally signed by the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, says on page 44, and this is "Keep yourselves in God's love," and I quote, True Christian conscientiously adhere to the principles stated at Romans chapter 13 verses 1 to 7. As you read over the passage, you can see that the superior authorities mentioned there are the secular governments. As long as Jehovah allows these human powers to exist, they perform important functions, maintaining a measure of order and provided needed services. Oh yes. We show our respect for these authorities by means of our law-abiding conduct. We are careful to pay whatever taxes we owe, to fill out properly any forms or documents that the government may require, and to comply with any laws that involve us. Romans 13, 1 to 7. But you haven't done it. You haven't done it. And so many children have been put at risk. So many children have been abused. I don't know what else to say on that. We are here to expose you. We're part of the apostate army, and I make no apology for doing this. You're a disgrace, and this needs to go out. And I advise people, read through jwnews.net, have a read of it yourself. It's all on there, and I'm sure this is just going to carry on unfolding. But I would stress that this organisation is turning itself inside out. It's like an animal that's been wounded. And it's gnashing about, thrashing about, but to disown 10,000 of your own publishers, to say that they're no longer your responsibility while they're out on the ministry. That's disassociation en masse as far as I'm concerned. I can't see it any other way, and you know you've put that in writing. You can't discipline these people after that. You have no right over these people after that. You have breached the legal contract of baptism over that. Of course you have. You have unilaterally imposed a difference to this symbolic spiritual contract between you and the publisher 10,000 times. The case rests. And I'll be interested in other people's views, and once you've read through this stuff, please let me know, because this stuff's going to go on and on.